The first time Daniel Carter saw the woman in the rain, he was late. Not just late. Late in the way that makes your heart pound and your hands shake, the kind of late that could cost you everything. He was supposed to be across town, sitting in a glass-walled conference room, interviewing for the job he'd spent the last 6 years working toward. Instead, he was stuck at a crosswalk, his umbrella useless against the sideways wind, watching a stranger struggle with a flat tire in the pouring rain. He almost kept walking. He almost told himself, not my problem. But then he saw the little girl in the back seat, her face pressed to the window, eyes wide and scared. Something in Daniel's chest twisted. He remembered his own daughter, Emma, waiting for him at home, her hair always coming loose from its ponytail, her shoes always on the wrong feet. He remembered the nights he'd spent sitting beside her hospital bed, promising her that he'd always come back, no matter what. So Daniel stopped. He set his briefcase down in a puddle, shrugged off his jacket, and knelt beside the car. The woman looked up, startled, her hair plastered to her cheeks. "You don't have to," she started, but Daniel was already loosening the lug nuts, his fingers numb from the cold. He worked quickly, methodically, the way his father had taught him when he was a boy. The rain soaked through his shirt, ran down his spine, but he didn't care. He just wanted to get the little girl out of the storm. When he finished, the woman tried to thank him, but Daniel just waved her off. "Get her home," he said, nodding toward the back seat. "That's what matters." He didn't wait for her reply. He grabbed his briefcase, now dripping wet, and sprinted for the subway, his shoes squelching with every step. He missed the interview. By the time he arrived, the receptionist was already packing up for the day. "I'm sorry, Mr. Carter," she said, not unkindly. "They've moved on to the next candidate." Daniel nodded, swallowing the disappointment. He didn't argue, he didn't explain, he just thanked her and left, his dreams dissolving in the rain. That night, he made mac and cheese for Emma, listening to her chatter about her day at school. He tried not to think about the job, about the future he'd just watched slip through his fingers. He tucked Emma into bed, kissed her forehead, and sat in the dark living room, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he'd made the right choice. The next morning, Daniel woke to the sound of Emma's laughter. She was watching cartoons, her legs tangled in a blanket, her hair a wild halo around her face. For a moment, everything felt okay. He made her breakfast, packed her lunch, and walked her to the bus stop, waving until the yellow bus turned the corner and disappeared. He spent the day searching for jobs, sending out resumes, making calls. The city felt colder, less forgiving. Every rejection stung a little more. By noon, he was sitting in a coffee shop, nursing a cup of Brunt coffee, when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. "Mr. Carter?" The voice was warm, confident, with a hint of amusement. "This is Olivia Grant. I believe you helped me with a flat tire yesterday." Daniel blinked, surprised. "Oh, yes. I'm glad you got home safe." "I did, thanks to you. I'd like to repay you. Lunch, perhaps." He hesitated. "That's not necessary." "I insist," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Meet me at the Willow Room, 1 o'clock. The Willow Room was the kind of place Daniel had only seen in magazines. White tablecloths, crystal glasses, waiters in black vests. He felt out of place in his wrinkled shirt and scuffed shoes, but Olivia greeted him like an old friend. She was different in the daylight, poised, elegant, her hair pulled back in a sleek bun. Her daughter, Lily, sat beside her, coloring quietly. They talked about everything and nothing. Olivia asked about his work, his daughter, his dreams. Daniel found himself telling her things he hadn't told anyone. About losing his wife, about raising Emma alone, about the job he'd missed because he'd stopped to help her. Olivia listened, really listened, her eyes never leaving his. When he finished, she smiled. "You know, sometimes the universe has a way of putting us exactly where we need to be." Daniel laughed, a little embarrassed. I'm not sure the universe is on my side these days. She leaned in, her voice soft. Maybe you're just not seeing the whole picture yet. After lunch, Olivia handed him a business card. Call me if you ever need anything, she said. Anything at all. Daniel tucked the card into his wallet, not expecting to use it. He thanked her, shook her hand, and left, feeling lighter than he had in weeks. Days passed. Daniel kept searching for work, kept caring for Emma, kept moving forward. But the world felt different now, as if something had shifted. He found himself thinking about Olivia, about her kindness, about the way she'd looked at him, as if she saw something he didn't. One afternoon, as he was picking Emma up from school, his phone rang again. This time, it was a job offer from a small nonprofit that worked with single parents. The pay wasn't great, but the hours were flexible, and the work felt meaningful. Daniel accepted, grateful for the chance to make a difference. He threw himself into the job, helping families find housing, childcare, support. He worked late, sometimes bringing Emma to the office, letting her draw at his desk while he made calls. The work was hard, but it mattered. For the first time in a long time, Daniel felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. But late at night, when the office was quiet and Emma was asleep, he wondered about the path he hadn't taken, the dream job he'd missed, the life he might have had. He didn't know that Olivia Grant was watching. Olivia Grant was not the kind of woman who let things go. She had built her reputation and her company on her ability to see what others missed, to find value where others saw only risk. She was used to being underestimated, to walking into boardrooms where her presence was a surprise, her authority a challenge. But she had learned over years of late nights and early mornings that the most important decisions were often made in moments that seemed insignificant at the time. She couldn't stop thinking about Daniel Carter, about the way he had knelt in the rain, ruining his suit to help a stranger, about the way he had spoken to his daughter, gentle and patient even when he was exhausted, about the way he had listened to Lily, her own daughter, as if her words mattered. Olivia had met hundreds of men in her life, executives, politicians, visionaries, but few had ever made her pause. Fewer still had made her wonder what she might be missing. She asked her assistant to run a background check, something she rarely did for personal reasons. The report was unremarkable. Daniel Carter, 34, widowed, one daughter, steady work history, no criminal record. A man who had done everything right and still found himself struggling. Olivia read the report twice, then set it aside. She didn't need paperwork to tell her what she already knew. The next week, Olivia found herself driving past the nonprofit where Daniel worked. She watched him through the window, laughing with a group of children, his daughter perched on his hip. He looked tired but happy. She wondered if he ever thought about the job he'd missed, if he regretted stopping to help her that day. She wondered if he would have done it for anyone, or if there was something about her, about Lily, that had made him stop. She decided to find out. The following Friday, Olivia called the nonprofit, introducing herself as a potential donor. She scheduled a meeting with the director, a kind woman named Mrs. Alvarez, and arrived with a check in hand. She toured the facility, asked questions, listened to stories. When she finally met Daniel, he was surprised but polite, shaking her hand with the same steady grip she remembered. They talked about the organization, about the families they served, about the challenges they faced. Olivia asked thoughtful questions, and Daniel answered honestly, his passion for the work shining through. He didn't mention the job he'd missed or the rain-soaked afternoon that had brought them together. He didn't ask for anything. He just did his job, quietly and well. After the meeting, Olivia lingered in the hallway, watching as Daniel helped a young mother fill out paperwork. He was patient, explaining each step, never rushing her. When he finished, he knelt beside Emma, tying her shoelaces with practiced hands. Olivia felt something stir in her chest, a longing she hadn't felt in years. She left a donation, larger than she'd planned, and slipped out before Daniel could thank her. She told herself it was enough, that she had repaid her debt, but she knew it wasn't true. That night, Olivia sat in her office staring at the city lights. She thought about her own journey, the sacrifices she'd made, the relationships she'd lost, the walls she'd built to protect herself. She thought about Lily, about the life she wanted for her daughter. She wondered if she had become too focused on success, too afraid to let anyone in. She picked up her phone and dialed Daniel's number. "Hello?" "It's Olivia," she said, her voice softer than she intended. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," Daniel replied. "Is everything okay?" "I was wondering if you and Emma would like to join Lily and me for dinner tomorrow. Nothing fancy, just dinner." There was a pause, and Olivia wondered if she had overstepped. But then Daniel said, "We'd like that. Thank you." The next evening, Olivia cooked for the first time in months. She made spaghetti and meatballs, Lily's favorite, and set the table with mismatched plates. When Daniel and Emma arrived, the girls disappeared into Lily's room, leaving the adults alone in the kitchen. They talked about everything, about parenting, about loss, about the strange ways life could change in an instant. Daniel told Olivia about his wife, about the promise he'd made to always put Emma first. Olivia shared stories from her own childhood, about growing up with a single mother, about the nights she'd spent dreaming of a different life. As the evening wore on, the conversation grew easier, the silences more comfortable. Daniel found himself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in months. Olivia watched him, her heart aching with something she couldn't name. After dinner, the girls put on a puppet show, using socks and paper bags. Daniel and Olivia sat side by side on the couch, clapping and cheering, their laughter mingling in the warm glow of the living room lamp. When it was time to leave, Daniel hesitated at the door. "Thank you," he said, his voice quiet. "For everything." Olivia smiled. "You're welcome. Let's do this again." As Daniel and Emma walked home, the city felt different, softer somehow, less lonely. Daniel looked down at his daughter, her hand small and warm in his. He thought about Olivia, about the way she had listened, about the way she had made him feel seen. He didn't know that Olivia was standing at her window, watching them disappear into the night, her heart full of hope and fear in equal measure. The days that followed were a blur of work and school and small shared moments. Daniel and Olivia began to see each other more often, sometimes with the girls, sometimes alone. They talked about their dreams, their fears, the things they wanted for their children. They shared stories, laughter, and slowly, trust. But as their connection deepened, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that there was something Olivia wasn't telling him. She was open and warm, but there was a distance in her eyes, a secret she kept hidden. He wondered about her work, about the long hours and late-night calls, about the way she seemed to know everyone and everything. One evening, as they walked through the park, Daniel finally asked, "What do you do, Olivia? I mean, really do?" She hesitated, her gaze fixed on the playground where Lily and Emma were chasing each other. "I run a company," she said finally. "It takes up more of my time than I'd like." Daniel smiled. "You must be good at it." Olivia laughed, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "I try, but sometimes I wonder if I'm missing the things that matter most." Daniel nodded, understanding more than she realized. "We all do, I think." They walked in silence, the city lights flickering in the distance. Daniel felt a weight lift from his shoulders, as if he had finally found someone who understood. The first snow of the season fell on a Thursday. Daniel woke to the sound of Emma's delighted squeals, her face pressed to the window, breath fogging the glass. He made pancakes while she danced around the kitchen, her excitement infectious. The world outside was transformed, the city softened by a blanket of white. For a moment, Daniel let himself believe that things could stay this way, that happiness could be simple, that hope could be enough. He bundled Emma into her coat and boots, and together they trudged to school, leaving footprints in the fresh snow. On the way back, Daniel's phone buzzed. It was Olivia. "Can you come by my office today?" she asked, her voice careful, almost hesitant. "There's something I want to show you." Daniel agreed, curiosity and nerves twisting in his stomach. He'd never been to Olivia's office before. She'd always met him in parks, at the nonprofit, or at her apartment. He wondered what she wanted to share and why she sounded so different. He arrived at a tall glass building downtown, the kind that seemed to scrape the sky. The lobby was all marble and chrome, filled with people in sharp suits moving with purpose. Daniel felt out of place in his old winter coat, but the receptionist greeted him by name and handed him a visitor's badge. He rode the elevator to the top floor, his heart pounding. When the doors opened, Olivia was waiting. She wore a navy suit, her hair pulled back, her expression unreadable. She led him through a maze of hallways, past offices filled with people who glanced up as they passed. Daniel caught snippets of conversation, numbers, deadlines, deals. He realized with a jolt that this was not just any company. This was Grant & Co., one of the largest firms in the city. Olivia stopped in front of a set of double doors. She paused, searching his face. "I should have told you sooner," she said quietly, "but I wanted you to know me first, not the title, not the company, just me." She pushed open the doors. The office was vast, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A wall of awards and photographs lined one side. A sleek desk stood at the center. Daniel took it all in, the realities settling over him like a weight. "You're the CEO," he said, the words barely more than a whisper. Olivia nodded. "I am." Daniel stared at her, 1,000 questions swirling in his mind. He thought about the dinners, the laughter, the way she had listened to him talk about his struggles, his dreams. He thought about the day in the rain, the flat tire, the little girl in the back seat. He wondered if any of it had been real. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice tight. Olivia stepped closer, her eyes searching his. "Because I wanted you to see me, Daniel. Not the company, not the money, just me. I've spent my whole life being defined by what I do, by what I've built. I didn't want that with you." Daniel looked away, his hands trembling. He felt foolish, exposed. He thought about all the times he doubted himself, all the times he'd wondered if he was enough. He wondered if Olivia had ever felt the same. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I should have told you, but I was afraid. Afraid you'd see me differently. Afraid you'd walk away." He turned back to her, his anger fading. He saw the fear in her eyes, the vulnerability she'd tried so hard to hide. He realized that for all her success, Olivia was just as scared as he was, scared of being alone, of being misunderstood, of losing something that mattered. "I'm not going anywhere," he said quietly, "but I need to know that what we have is real, that it's not just another project for you." Olivia reached for his hand, her grip warm and steady. "It's real, Daniel, more real than anything I've ever built." They stood together in the quiet office, the city spread out below them. For the first time, Daniel saw Olivia not as a CEO, but as a woman, flawed, hopeful, brave. He saw himself reflected in her, two people searching for meaning in a world that often felt cold and indifferent. The weeks that followed were a test. The truth about Olivia's identity changed things, at first, in small ways, then in larger ones. Daniel struggled with the attention, the expectations, the whispers from people who thought he was after her money or her power. He worried about Emma, about how the changes in their lives would affect her. He worried about losing himself in Olivia's world. But Olivia was patient. She made space for Daniel and Emma, inviting them into her life without asking them to change. She showed up at Emma's school plays, cheered at her soccer games, learned how to make pancakes on Saturday mornings. She let Daniel see the parts of her that no one else saw, the doubts, the fears, the dreams she kept hidden. Slowly, Daniel began to trust. He let Olivia in, let her help carry the burdens he'd shouldered alone for so long. He learned that love was not about grand gestures or perfect timing, but about showing up day after day, even when it was hard. One evening, as snow fell softly outside, Daniel sat with Olivia and their daughters in the living room. Emma and Lily were building a fort out of blankets and pillows, their laughter filling the apartment. Olivia leaned against Daniel, her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Missing that interview?" Daniel smiled, watching the girls. "Not for a second. If I hadn't stopped, I never would have met you. I never would have found this." Olivia squeezed his hand. "Sometimes the best things in life come from the choices we don't plan." Daniel nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle in his chest. He thought about the rain, the flat tire, the missed opportunity. He thought about the path he'd chosen, the life he'd built, the love he'd found. He realized that in the end, it wasn't about the job he'd missed or the dreams he'd chased. It was about the people he'd chosen, the moments he'd shared, the family he'd created. As the fire crackled and the snow fell, Daniel knew he was exactly where he was meant to be.